Hey y'all, welcome to Unit 4, which is over communication challenges. And oh, there we go. I was hoping that would come up soon. And this is our last unit of oral communication. We've gone over ethical communication, we have gone over intrapersonal communication, we've done interpersonal communication. Now we are going over some just general challenges you'll face with any kind of communication, whether it's ethical or with yourself or with others. So take notes. You have your set on Google Classroom. Make sure you fill in the blanks as you go. We are obviously not going to go through all of these at once. We're just going to go through about 7 or 8 slides today. But make sure you're keeping up with these and not saving them for all at the end because that would be really overwhelming. So just make sure you're doing the amount of coursework that I give you every day so you don't overwhelm yourself and get really upset. Let's get started. So here are some of the major communication challenges that we are going to face. And there's probably a lot more, honestly, but these are the ones that I've mostly encountered in my research and that I've condensed into these main 4. So, a first challenge that can interfere with your ability to communicate is that you may not have awareness of the communication context. We're going to talk a lot about that in this unit. So, if you're not sure what that really means, hang tight. Another communication challenge is that there may be little to no attempt to maintain audience interest and attention through delivery. So you may have written a really great speech or something, but if you're not trying to engage your audience with the way you deliver that message, that's going to be a really big challenge to communicate with your audience because I can have the most interesting, well written speech in the world, but if I read it like a robot with no facial expressions, no hand gestures, you're not going to really want to listen to me that much. So that can be a big challenge. Another challenge with communication is when people are unreceptive to constructive criticism. Nobody's perfect. Everyone needs feedback. We grow by learning how we can improve. But a lot of people aren't really good at giving criticism. And so a lot of us aren't good at receiving criticism. Makes sense. But even if someone's really bad at giving criticism, we want to be teachable. We want to have teachable spirits. And so that can be a big challenge to communication if you will not receive any kind of feedback on how to improve. And then lastly, there are specific barriers that can challenge your communication, your ability to communicate. There can be barriers with how your message is written. There can be problems with the audience that prevents them from being communicated with, or with the environment that you're in that prevents communication from happening. So again, it's errors in reasoning within your message, listening skills in the audience, or it can be something about the environment that you're in that can create a distraction. And so I hope that in this unit, we are going to learn how to hopefully predict that some of these are coming our way and how to hopefully prevent them or at least how to manage them. So, like I said, the first one we're going to learn about is context. So, the core idea of this class is written out in the syllabus. So, hopefully, this idea is not totally unfamiliar to you. But the core idea of this class is how do I communicate who I am and what I think in a way my audience will understand? And the way I think about this is in college, I had this geology teacher. Geology is like the study of rocks. And I thought it'd be a really neat class. And the teacher clearly had a lot of knowledge about this subject. So it was a lot of who she was, a lot of what she'd studied, a lot of what she thought about, but she could not communicate what she knew in a way that any of us could understand. Her audience was a bunch of like dumb jocks and college kids. We literally called the class Rocks for Jocks. I'm not saying athletes are dumb. I'm just saying when you go to college, there are certain classes that are geared towards athletes that can focus on their athletic career and getting. And this was one of those classes, supposedly, but this teacher just could not engage her audience in a way that communicated who she was and what she thought about. And so for us, we don't want to encounter that. And so one of the big communication challenges we need to understand is the context. The word context means the circumstances that form the setting for an event, statement, or idea, and in terms of which it can be fully understood and assessed. So you may have heard, oh, well, you took that out of context. So let's say like, if okay, so if my husband is being goofy, I go, I hate you. Like, oh, the context is that he's being silly and he's bothering me. So I go, I hate you. You're so annoying. But like if you write that on paper, you see the words, Shelby told her husband, I hate you, you're so annoying. It's like, oh, out of context, that would seem like I hate my husband and think he's annoying. But when you put it in context, you can fully understand and assess the situation. Some great examples are within these two articles that are in your notes. And so either you can pause the video and read them now, or you can read them after the video. Either way, I need you to read them. They are definitely going to be test material. So read them now, read them later. Either way, at some point, you're going to have. And it's a great example of how people have always said, like, oh, the Bible is taken out of context a lot in our culture. And this can give you a good understanding of well, what context is, but also how to utilize it appropriately. And also, if anyone ever comes at you with these Bible verses and is like, well, the Bible says, blah, 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 you can go, they's taken out of context, blah, blah, blah. And so please read those articles. They are incredible and they give you a very good lens of what context is. So you can pause the video now and read those, or just read those afterwards. But either way, please read them. So, context is important for us as public speakers, as communicators, because knowing the context helps you know what content to share and how to share it. That sentence alone, right there, is definitely going to be on the test and on the final. So, if you feel like it, highlight it. But I'm going to ask y'all throughout what are the two things that knowing the context helps you know about your speech? And it's those two things. Knowing the context helps you know what content you want to share and how to share it. And there are three major areas of context that we need to be assessing as we prepare for any kind of communication scenario. And these areas of context are the purpose, the audience, and the setting. Now, today we're just going to go over the purpose and we'll go over audience and setting here in the next few days. So let's start by talking about the purpose as our first area of context. So I want y'all to take a second and look at these pictures and these descriptions, and I want you to try to figure out which area of context these fit with. I know we said we're jumping into purpose, but I want to go through these first because it's fun. So our areas of our areas of context are purpose, audience, and setting. So look at these pictures and try and figure out which area of context goes with words go with which picture. So on the left side, it says Michael Scott delivers a speech informing his audience on how to properly perform CPR. Then in the middle, it says members of a corporate branch in one location share a presentation with members of a corporate branch in another location. And the final one on the right says a teacher prepares to share the puberty talk for boys with his young male students. So I want you to pause the video real quick and try and figure out which area of context you think fits with which picture. Hopefully you paused it. If not, I'll go ahead and tell you. So first, the picture on the left is purpose, because this is Michael Scott delivers a speech informing his audience on how to properly perform CPR. So it has this emphasis on informing his audience. So that's going to be his purpose. Like, okay, why is he speaking? To inform his audience on this topic. This picture in the middle, the area of context is the setting, because that's a big part of how this is going to get presented. They have to take into consideration the context of that their audience is not in the same place as them, and they're also using electronic means to share their message. And then lastly is the audience, because this teacher has to take in consideration the context that he's speaking to young male students, that he's talking to them about the puberty talk. So it's going to shape kind of, okay, how am I going to engage this specific audience? Now that y'all have got the hang of it, let's try another one. So on the left side, it says a teacher prepares a lesson on elementary math for her young students. In the middle, it says President George W. Bush delivers a eulogy at a funeral to celebrate the life of Ronald Reagan. And then on the right side, it says Martin Luther King Jr. delivers a speech to civil rights supporters from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. Now, again, go ahead and pause this video and then try and figure out which area of context fits with which picture. And again, hopefully you paused it. This first picture on the left is going to be audience. So again, this teacher is preparing her lesson. She has to make sure that she is taking into consideration the context of who she's speaking to. So if she prepares a lesson on elementary math for high school seniors, that's going to be pretty redundant and they're going to be really bored. So she's taking into consideration who her audience is so she can make sure that she's reaching them in a way that they can understand, in the way that's interesting to them. This middle picture is going to be purpose. So what's his reason for speaking? He has to understand, okay, what's the context? Why am I speaking? What's my purpose? And it's to deliver a eulogy to celebrate the life of this former president. And then lastly, the context here is setting. So he's taking consideration the setting. He's talking about civil rights. Obviously, Abraham Lincoln was a huge civil rights advocate. And so giving this speech fits really well with this setting that he's chosen. And so we have to take that context into consideration. And so those are some like interesting different examples of how we can take into consideration these areas of context when we speak. Now we're going to get started with purpose. So we have 3 different purposes for speaking at any time. Our purpose can be to celebrate, to inform, or to persuade. So each of those different purposes has a type of public speaking that is paired with it. So for example, the purpose of epideictic speaking is to celebrate. So like the type of public speaking would be epideictic speaking, and its purpose is to celebrate. Some situations where you might hear an epideictic speech would be at a funeral, like when we saw the previous example, with George W. Bush giving the eulogy at Ronald Reagan's funeral, or at award ceremonies. You would hear these at the Oscars or the Grammys or the Golden Globes. Anything where it's like celebrating an award being given, or at a wedding, if you hear any kind of toast, that's going to be an epideictic speech. Now, I know it sounds kind of silly. You're like, wait, you said the purpose is to celebrate, but you're giving the speech at a funeral. But like I said in the last picture, like you're celebrating the life of the person who's passed away. So it would still be a celebratory speech, not informative or persuasive. In an epideictic speech, the language can be much more emotional, and you're not just going to be sharing basic facts or trying to persuade them to do something. You're just celebrating. In the second type of purpose we have for speaking, however, there would be a lot more facts. So the purpose of informative speaking, obviously, is to inform. Some situations where you might hear an informative speech might be a class lecture like this, or a cooking class or something. So the goal here is not to persuade, you are just sharing information. Now, persuasion may happen. So like, for example, I love MasterChef, I love the Great British Baking Show, but those shows aren't trying to persuade me to cook. They're not trying to persuade me to become a chef, but I was just persuaded by the information that was shared. And so just because unintentional persuasion happens does not change the purpose. So I'm giving you this information just so that way you can be informed as a potential future public speaker and as a communicator. I'm not trying to persuade you to go be a motivational speaker. I'm not trying to persuade you to become an oral communication teacher. I'm not trying to persuade you to do anything really. I guess I'm trying to persuade you to study for your test, I guess. But I'm sharing information with you. But if you happen to incorporate these into your daily life, as a result, that doesn't mean that my purpose changes. But of course, I do hope you use these things in your daily life. But so when you're sharing information, you want to try and be as neutral as possible in the way you share that information, because unintentional persuasion can and does happen. And so you want to try and be as neutral as possible, share both sides, and use fact-based appeals. Now, something interesting is that the third purpose for speaking combines emotional language and fact-based appeals. So the purpose of persuasive speaking is to persuade, which means to change one's actions or beliefs. And situations where you might hear a persuasive speech are a political campaign or a sermon at church. With those, they're very much trying to persuade you to vote for them or to accept Jesus as your savior. There are very clear actions they want you to take as a result of their message. Now, this purpose for speaking is going to use fact-based appeals, but it's also going to use emotional language. It needs more facts than emotions. If you only play off people's emotions, that's not very strong persuasion. It's not going to be very long-lasting persuasion. So the fact-based appeals are the more important component here. I believe that's that. Yep, that is that for what's the purpose. So that's all for today. If you didn't read those articles, please do so. It's better to do it now than save it for later. They're not really long, they're interesting. Just go ahead and read them. And then I'll be back on Thursday with another video.